You're listening to The Clevelander, where we're diving into all things innovation and transformation across the region. Each week, we'll take a look at the biggest business headlines in Greater Cleveland.
This week, we're talking return to office.
There's a lot to unpack, so let's get started. Know what's fascinating? 5 years after COVID changed everything about how we work, 80% of American CEOs are now predicting that we'll see more time in the office over the next 3 years.
Well, that's certainly quite a shift from all those predictions about the permanent remote work revolution. What's driving this dramatic change in Cleveland specifically?
So here's what's really interesting. The Greater Cleveland Partnership, the Regional Chamber of Commerce, and Downtown Cleveland, Inc. just did this eye-opening survey of their business members, and they found that over 42% of companies are already requiring 4 or more days in the office, which is way higher than most people would expect.
Interesting. And I imagine that has some pretty big implications for downtown Cleveland's recovery, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting. Michael Deemer from Downtown Cleveland, Inc. says that they're tracking visitor numbers to downtown Cleveland, and they're hovering around 60% of pre-pandemic levels. But here's the twist. Cleveland is actually outpacing national return to office rates.
That's surprising, given how much we hear about empty downtowns.
Yeah.
So what are they doing differently here in downtown Cleveland?
Well, they're taking this really creative approach. Instead of just demanding people come back, they're planning something like 300 events across 100 days in 8 downtown spaces. We're talking food trucks, concerts, the new lighting on Public Square by Destination Cleveland, really making it worth people's while to be downtown.
I think that's such a good strategy.
Sure.
It's not just about work. It's about creating an experience that makes people want to be downtown.
Exactly. And when you look at the downtown-specific numbers, they're even more telling. Of the companies surveyed in downtown Cleveland, about 77% require 3 or more days in the office, which is higher than the regional average.
Though I have to wonder about the impact on all those small businesses that have been struggling since the pandemic. So how are they factoring into this equation?
That's actually one of the main drivers behind this push. Baiju Shah, the CEO of the Greater Cleveland Partnership, mentioned that a lot of their members were specifically asking about what other companies were doing, partly because they're worried about the broader economic ecosystem, all the coffee shops, restaurants, small businesses that depend on office workers.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like a domino effect. When offices are empty, those businesses suffer, which affects the whole downtown vibe.
Right. And here's something interesting about the timing. Most employees are still working remotely on Fridays. It's become this unofficial hybrid work week where Monday through Thursday are the in-office days.
That's actually pretty clever. It gives people that flexibility they've gotten used to while still maintaining most of the benefits of in-person work.
And speaking of benefits, the survey revealed something unexpected, which is that even when people have the option to work remotely, many are choosing to come into the office anyway. It's like there's this natural gravitational pull back to in-person work.
That's fascinating. Do we know what's motivating people to come in voluntarily?
Well, according to GCP and DCI, it's about collaboration and culture, but they're also being pretty strategic about this transition. So they're recommending companies consider things like core hours instead of strict schedules, making sure that they have the right office amenities and giving people plenty of time to adjust.
That sounds like such a more thoughtful approach than just mandating everyone back at once.
Definitely. And here's another interesting piece. They surveyed 42 different companies across various industries, from hospitality to tech, and half of them had fewer than 100 employees. So we're not just talking about big corporations here.
And that's an important point. Small and medium-sized businesses are really the backbone of our local economy.
Yeah, and get this, the federal and state governments are actually leading the charge with full return to office mandates. It's like they're setting the tone for the private sector.
You know what I find really interesting about all this? It's how different this looks from what everyone was predicting during the pandemic.
Right? Remember all those articles about how remote work was the new normal? But here we are in 2025, 5 years later, and it's starting to feel more like a specific moment in time rather than a permanent shift.
Though I'd imagine that not everyone is thrilled about this trend of being back in the office.
And that's where the balance comes in. GCP and DCI are emphasizing that while in-person collaboration is important, companies need to maintain some flexibility. It's not about going back to 2019. It's about finding a new model that works for everyone.
And it sounds like Cleveland is really trying to lead by example with all these initiatives to make downtown that much more appealing.
Exactly. And here's what I think is really smart about their approach. They're not just focusing on the workday. Those 300 events that they're planning, they're spread across different times and locations. So it's about creating a vibrant downtown environment 24/7.
Yeah, and that could really change the whole dynamic of downtown Cleveland.
And that, I think, is really the bigger story here. It's not just about return to office policies. It's about reimagining what a downtown can be in this post-pandemic world. And Cleveland seems to be positioning itself as a model for how to do this thoughtfully and successfully.
With all these changes happening, it'll be pretty fascinating to see where things stand by the end of the year, or even just how things play out this summer.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think this whole conversation really shows how Cleveland's business community is coming together to figure this out. Whether it's sharing policies, planning events, or supporting local businesses, everyone seems to be pulling in the same direction on this one.
That kind of collaboration could really make the difference in making this transition successful.
And on that hopeful note, I think we should wrap it up. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, just that it's encouraging to see a city taking such a comprehensive approach to this challenge. Instead of just hoping things will work out, they're actively creating reasons for people to want to be downtown.
Well said. And with that, we'll call it a day. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you next time on The Clevelander.
Take care, everyone. The Clevelander is an unscripted podcast brought to you by the Greater Cleveland Partnership and created with the help of the latest in AI tools. To learn more, visit greatercle.com.